With the new one? All right. We can share.
Thank you.
I think this is old news for you.
And good evening, everyone. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, if I could have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's business meeting of December 8th, 2025.
Kevin and Eric. It's hard when I go to look that back that way. We can do that.
Okay, any discussion other than who was first and who's on second? All in favor? Aye. All right, the open forum. The Greenville Central School District wishes to facilitate public access to meetings of the Board of Education and to provide an opportunity for public comment at these meetings. Accordingly, the open forum provides an opportunity for members of the public to share thoughts about topics on the agenda. An individual's comment shall be limited to 5 minutes. Additionally, comments may be emailed to the district clerk, Daphne Pearson, using email pearsond@greenvillecsd.org. In order for an email to be read during the meeting, it must be received by 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting and state that the email is to be read out loud. Emails shall be limited to 600 words. Please note that this is not the time to register complaints that need to be addressed confidentially through the proper channels. Remarks that might be considered defamatory, obscene, profane, stigmatizing, or otherwise impermissible in public forums are prohibited and will be declared out of order. Board members actively listen during open forum, but may not immediately respond to comments. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Do we have any emails?
Yes, we do. We have one.
Okay.
Dear board members, I am writing with concern regarding the apparent appointment of James Bucci to the school board, which I was informed about by another concerned parent at a weekend Rensselaerville library event. I didn't think it could be true given what was said at the previous 10-6 board meeting. The board pledged to keep the community informed and stated that no decisions were being made right away. I just watched the next board meeting from last night, 11/17, to check my facts due to frequent evening conflicts. I'm not able to attend in person, but I do listen to the meetings on YouTube regularly in the evening or the following day. I share Margaret Kelly's concern from the public hearing. What was the process for deciding to appoint James Bucci? Of the 70 letters the board president read and personally replied to, how many were in support of Bucci and how many advocated for an alternative? My neighbors and I are shocked by the lack of transparency on this issue after board president Ms. Young so plainly stated at the last board meeting that the community clearly cared and that a transparent process would be honored. Despite the close vote tallies in the 2025 board election, James Bucci lost in a 3-way race for 2 seats. His outspoken supporter, Rob Condicio, lost the previous year, and Mr. Bucci lost another time the year before that. Mr. Bucci's loss by 5 or 7 votes in a 3-way race doesn't make him the first runner-up. It makes him the one candidate out of 3 that was passed over by voters, and the only candidate that lost twice in 3 years, both in elections with remarkable turnouts and community engagement the district hasn't seen in recent history. Voters have a strong, consistent opinion regarding board membership in recent years. Selecting Mr. Bucci without transparency feels like a slap to the voters' faces and disregards any process. We are eager to be informed about 1, the process the board employed to arrive at its decision, 2, what other candidates were considered in the vacuum, 3, how support was quantified to result in a decision. I'm also eager to learn 4, what training Mr. Bucci should expect to complete between now and the end of his appointed term, and when. Can this letter please be read into the record during the next public comment period and these points addressed at the next board meeting? Respectfully, Sarah Rice. No other emails.
All right, then I am going to move us on to the presentations, and we have the budget development process. It's that time of year.
It is that time of year. It's hard to imagine that we've made it to this point. Feels like we just voted out a budget. But this is a process that is really doesn't get any time off, even as we kick it off today. There's been a number of conversations already and looking at different things. So tonight is really just the budget overview. So we will go through the process that goes into working through the budget. Again, the development of this budget is an important process. I will just kind of talk about the first couple slides, and then I will kick it off to Todd to fill out the rest. We see this slide in so many of our presentations because, again, it's a reminder to the board and to our community that we do everything based on the district mission and goals. These are at the forefront of our decisions in just about everything we do. So we just want to call folks' attention to, again, curriculum goal, culture goal, and community goal. Those types of things are part of the process as we go through putting together a budget, first for the board to adopt, and then for our voters to vote on. So Todd will walk us through the budget construction.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening, all. So yes, it is that time of year to start talking about budget. Tonight, as Mike said, really is just kind of the big picture overview of the budget process. So we like to take some time in December to set up the stage and outline what the process will look like from really tonight all the way through the budget vote in May. So to do that, the board has two different documents tonight, just to touch base and be aware of what you have. One is a copy of the slide deck or the slides that are up on the screen. And then the other is the annual budget development handbook, which is a thicker document with quite a bit of information in it. Think of this as like budgeting 101. It really is the foundation of information that can be utilized and referenced throughout the budget process. So that's for board members, but it's also for community members, staff, faculty, anybody that's interested and wants to learn more about what goes into the budget development process and all of the kind of rules, regulations, requirements that we have to follow in order to make the budget come together and be a balanced budget. So that's the second document, is the budget development handbook. So tonight I'm going to walk through a couple of slides and give you kind of different ways to think about the budget process or the development process overall. The first one is this formula. Hopefully this looks familiar to some folks because these are pretty much taken from last year, updated where appropriate. But we like to use some of these same slides to frame the budget development process. So this first one is a formula to think about. So what do we start with? We're going to start on the left-hand side of this slide and kind of work our way across till we get to the bottom part, which is the proposed budget. So starting on the left is the rollover budget. So the rollover budget is a process of taking the current year, 25-26 budget, and rolling it into next year, what it would be for 26-27. To do this, to create the rollover budget, we increase costs or update costs in all the areas that we know about. So there's some things that we know for certain costs will increase or costs will change. So for example, our salaries. The salaries that we have with employees across the district, we know that those will increase one year to another, so we will increase them in the rollover budget. Contracts that we have with different vendors that we know we're going to roll from one year to the next, there's typically an increase in those costs. BOCES costs, so services that we purchase through BOCES for the purpose of the rollover budget, and you'll hear all of this again in January when we present the rollover budget, but we use just a flat 3% increase as a starting place for BOCES. And then other things like retirement costs, utilities, insurance, and debt service. So these are all areas that we know or have a pretty good prediction of where our costs will fall in 26-27, so we incorporate them into the 26-27 rollover budget. One note on this specific point is the salary piece. There is a unique part, and this is in the budget handbook, that across the district at the end of this current school year, 25-26, our labor contracts with our different unions and our employees are expiring. So those contracts end at the end of this current year. So this year is the year of negotiations and creating new contracts going forward into next year. I mention that because that creates a specific unique challenge in the development of that rollover budget, because while we know those salary increases will happen, we don't know exactly where all of those will land, right? Because it will depend on where the contracts are settled. So all of that, the rollover budget, is put together, already started that work in my office, the business office. We continue that throughout December, and we present that in January. So that's the January board budget meeting, is all about the rollover budget. So once we have that, the next little graphic, budget priorities. So we take the rollover budget, and then we work into that our budget priorities. So the budget process really is a collaborative process that pulls information and ideas from all different sections of the district. For example, that starts in November with our team leaders and department chairs across the district, gathering feedback and information from their departments and teams, and putting together their budget requests that go to the administrator of each building. So that's one example of how our budget process is collaborative. So we take that information, the administrators, the supervisors take that information and review those requests along with our district data, and as Mike mentioned, our mission, goals, and vision, making sure we're always pointing in the same direction, and take all those things into consideration and put together what we consider our budget priorities. What do we want to make sure we maintain in the 26-27 budget, and what are things we maybe want to change or alter in next year? From there, we have budget modifications. So if there was a request to change a specific program in the budget priority process, well, that would maybe potentially result in something changing in the cost of that program. So that's the budget modification piece, where we take all this information that we've gathered, take those priorities, and make adjustments to what started out as that rollover budget. We make adjustments. As part of that, we will present to the board in February and March the budget broken down into the 3 components. So those components are the program, the cap, and putting them into that budget. Moving one more picture over is revenue. So we have all the expenditures of the district, what we as a district spend the money on. Well, the flip side of the budget is how do we pay for that? What are the revenues that we take in as a district? The 2 specific main categories of revenue are our property taxes and then state aid. So on the property tax side, the setting of tax rates and what we will collect is from taxpayers is actually set by March, when we have to submit our property tax cap calculation, which sets how much our tax levy will increase. So we have to figure that out by March. And then on the state aid side, we start with projections that are released in January. We get what's called the first run from New York State, which is our first set of numbers from the state. And we hope, always hope, to have the final numbers from the state by early April. So as I mentioned, a challenge on the expenditure side with contracts and salaries. There's also a challenge on the revenue side this year when we talk about state aid. The question of where we will end up in terms of receiving state aid for 26-27. And it's just overview. So we'll get way more into this in future presentations, but kind of the coming attractions or the snapshot is that we have, as a district, been on the verge of being called what's hold harmless. That means where districts in recent years that are on hold harmless have received just a 2% flat percentage increase in state aid. We, in recent years, have been on formula, which means we get more than 2% because it's based on our enrollment and it's based on need. So last year we were right on the cusp of between being on formula or being on hold harmless. It looks like currently, looking at our current enrollment, that for 26-27 we will kind of shift over to the hold harmless side. What that means is the increase that we get in state aid is very likely to be less than what we've received in recent years. And at the state level, with many uncertainties, there's no guarantee that that 2% minimum increase that hold harmless districts have received in the past couple of years, that will hold true for 26-27. In all of that, lots of ifs, right? And lots of projections and predictions. Still early on in the process, but I think it's important to kind of just mention these pieces as information starts to come from the state, and I'm at regional meetings and hearing things Just important to kind of start to frame the picture of what the budget construction process will look like.
So in fact, with the hold harmless, that was one of the sticking points that held up the budget this past, at the state level this past year. So, because there were some school districts that were looking at significant cuts. Could you talk a little bit, because I want to make sure people really understand the risk of, as you shift over, it could be significant.
So the past 2 years at the state level, some of the conversation has been for those districts that are hold harmless to not hold them harmless anymore, which means they would actually decrease in state aid significantly. That didn't end up happening, but that was some of the statewide conversation of what would it look like if every district was put on formula. That means many districts that are on hold harmless would actually lose funding. For us, because we've been on formula, we wouldn't really look to, even worst case scenario, we wouldn't look to lose any state aid. It's more, we wouldn't get the increase that we have in recent years, or maybe it would just stay flat. Again, what happens at the state level? Lots of ifs in there, but this is just some of the conversation as I've been at meetings and reading things, and the fact that we are shifting from on formula to hold harmless. We just need to be aware of that and keep it in mind. And then shifting all the way to the right of this slide, use of fund balance and reserves. This also goes along with the revenue portion. This refers to any portion of the district's fund balance from the previous fiscal year, or in this case, the current fiscal year, that we would actually pull over and carry into the next year's budget as revenue. So this is always a balancing act in my office of looking at our fund balance, looking to see what we used from last year to this year in fund balance to balance out our revenue side of the budget. That work starts really in January and goes through March when we make final decisions about what the overall budget will be. So all these different pieces, I like this slide just because it kind of shows the process of the budget development, but it also breaks it down into these major categories of step by step. We start with this, we add or subtract some things, and work our way through until we get to the bottom, which would be the official proposed budget, which would be what goes up for voters in May. A different way of thinking about a lot of the same information is just putting this in an overall timeline from July 1 all the way through June. So throughout this current year, 25-26, what does the budget development process look like and what happens in each month throughout the year? So just talking through this slide, we'll start over on the left again. So between August and October, we established the budget process. So the board, at a previous meeting, we reviewed the budget development calendar for the year, and the board adopted or approved that budget development calendar. So that's really the first big step in the development process for the year, is creating and accepting that calendar, because then that guides our work throughout the year. September, October, and into November, teacher leaders develop budget requests for their departments and teams and submit them to their building administrators. From October through December, administrators and supervisors develop their budgets based on the feedback that they've gotten from their departments. And then in November into December, really December, those supervisors and administrators start to meet with myself and Mr. Bennett. Actually have the first one. Rich is the lucky guy. He drew the short straw, I think. He was the first one that happened last week. So we've started that process of, by department and by building, what are the requests and the needs for 26-27. Also in December, as I mentioned on the previous slide, we really get deep into working on the rollover budget in my office, and currently we are at the step of looking at current salaries and doing our best to project where those salaries will end up for the 26-27 school year. Across the top of this slide, the boxes that are in kind of that maroon color, those are the actual board meetings that we have budget presentations at. So for tonight, December 9th, it's that budget overview that we're currently walking through. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but just the preview. January 12th is the next budget meeting, which will be the rollover budget. So again, I'm not going to go through every single piece. I just want to go through the items that we've worked on to date. And we will revisit this at each of our budget development meetings and kind of take a pulse of where are we and what's upcoming. And then one last, kind of a third different way of thinking about the budget from big picture is looking at it from 3 big decision points. So just touching on each one of these briefly. So starting with the one on the left, manage, program, and staffing. So this really connects to what I was mentioning earlier, budget priorities and our programs as an administrative team and supervisors thinking about what are the needs and what do we want to see for Greenville in the 26-27 school year and how it relates to budget. So that's a big part of identifying what do we need in the 26-27 school year to do what we want to do. So those priorities are, we work on them now in December, but it's really January to April, constantly revisiting those. If there's a need to cut something, if there's not enough funding to fund something, if there's a need that pops up that we weren't aware of, how are we going to fund that? Constantly revisiting what we are going to be looking at for 26-27 and how to make sure we get those things in the budget. But in there are lots of decisions that need to be made, right? There's always lots of wish lists and requests and needs, but we have to balance that with the reality of the budget. That's that first box on the left, that maroon box of manage, program, and staffing. Over to the right, the levy and property taxes. This is also a main decision point, and this is really a decision point for the board of looking at, when we get to this point on revenue, looking at what is the tax cap percentage. So what is the highest rate that we can increase taxes for the 26-27 school year that requires a simple majority vote? That's the tax cap. Right? So having conversation about what is that number and where does the board feel comfortable about putting the budget out for voters to approve. So that's a big decision point for the board to consider all the different pieces that go into the tax cap and what they want to support as that number. As a reminder, if we go over that tax cap, it requires a supermajority vote from voters. So again, that's a big decision point. What do we want to collect for taxes and the tax rate? And then the last section on this, on the bottom of the slide, is the use of fund balance and reserves. This again really starts to happen in January through March. This means looking at the funds that we currently have in our reserves, also thinking about money that we have on hand and might have on hand at the end of this current year, and do we want to put any of that money into a specific reserve? And then the other piece of that is the fund balance. So of the current money that we have in this year's budget, as we get into the end of the year, we refer to them as end of year funds or the fund balance, how much of those funds do we want to use as revenue in 26-27, meaning that we're actually going to hold that money and pull it over into the 26-27 school year as a source of revenue. So that's again a major decision point of making sure we balance what we do with fund balance and reserves over the short term and long term. So those 3 slides, lots of information, kind of 3 different ways of looking at and thinking about the budget development process. Any questions? I have a couple more things to touch on, but just pause there if there's any other questions.
I have a quick question.
No, like, because they can't hear you on the recording.
I understand.
There you go.
There you go.
It might be getting ahead of myself. When it comes to the fund balance, the reserves, what other areas would funds be pulled from other than prior remaining funds from the prior year's budget that would move forward?
I don't understand your question.
Sure.
Sorry.
Sure. Once we get later in the year,
Yep.
when there's a possible deficit, is that correct?
A deficit for 26-27?
Either budget, at any point.
So we wouldn't have a budget for this current year. If we did, somebody should look to replace me. So there should not be a deficit for this current year. Well, I say that unless like state aid, something happened at the state level and they didn't give us any additional aid. That would be catastrophic and we'd work through it if that ever happened.
Okay.
If we had a deficit in the planning of the 26-27 budget, that is sometimes where we look at fund balance, meaning, okay, what money do we currently have in this current year budget that we didn't spend, we don't see a need that we're going to have to spend it currently, that we could hold and carry over into next year. So I'll give you a specific example. When we were creating this current year budget, and we were tightening things up and getting to a place of almost having it balanced, one of the needs that came up was transportation needed a new bus lift. The old lift had failed, like we can't not do this, right? We need a bus lift in order to maintain what our bus garage does. We specifically, in this current year's budget, held the money from last year into this year so that we could buy the lift in this current year. We didn't increase taxes to do that, we didn't use state aid to do that. We specifically pulled money from last year into this year so that we can make that purchase.
Gotcha. It does. I was looking at just at some of the trainings that I was doing there, was talking about cash flow, that there's opportunity, or sometimes there's timelines don't always line up with state aid and such. That's what I was looking at. So I was wondering where else could funds come from if we didn't have it already set aside from prior funds that we had already received.
Now I understand. Thank you for reporting. So we do have reserves. For example, we have a reserve for TRS, Teacher Retirement System. So worst case scenario, we could pull funds from the Teacher Retirement System reserve to pay this current year what we have to pay out to TRS to free money up to you somewhere else. So like we have, that's the purpose of reserves, right? You keep those reserves for a time where unplanned things happen, or a crisis, or whatever it might be comes up. So that is a place. In here, I don't know the page up or number off the top of my head, there's a page in the Budget Development Handbook that lists all of our current reserves and the amounts that we currently have in those reserves. And they're very specific. So we have a capital reserve. That one has different restrictions. We can't just pull that money any old time. That has to be used for the purpose of the capital project.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just to kind of mention, some of those reserves, James, have caps or maximums that can be achieved.
Yeah.
So we can only put money up to 2 million.
In the capital project.
Right, in the capital project, and we can only put money into the reserve up to 4%. So New York State regulates how much can be set aside.
Yes. Yes, it is. So page 19. Thanks, Ms. Vicky. So the other portion of what I wanted to share tonight was just do a quick walkthrough of the Budget Development Handbook. There is a lot of information in here. By no means am I going to touch on everything or talk about everything, just kind of giving you an outline of the overall document. So up on the screen here, just giving you kind of the main topics that are on the first 4 pages. So the first section of the handbook talks about the continuous review of the current budget. So while we're talking about budget development and predicting and planning for 26-27, well, a big piece of budget development and budget management is the current year's budget. Yes, it's been developed, it's been approved by voters, and we're enacting it, but a big part is continually reviewing where we are with our current budget and making sure we're controlling costs, aware of any unseen expenditures, looking at revenues. So that's the first part of that handbook. Also on the first page is information about the rollover budget. So I gave a little information earlier. There's more detail in there of what do we actually include when we talk about increases in the rollover budget. Pages 2 and 3 take similar information to what I had up on the slide with the timeline, but breaks it down in more detail of how do we come up with the expenditures? What's the timeline for budgeting what we think expenditures will be for 26-27? And also on the revenue side, what's the timeline or time frame for creating the budget of revenue and projecting what we will receive for revenue in 26-27? In addition to that, estimation of expenditures and revenues, so just talking about, again, that process of how do we come up with the final budget for expenditures and final budget for revenues. Page 4 talks a little bit about some of the budget development considerations. So this would be budget priorities, it would be contractual pieces, it would be increases to TRS and ERS, Teacher Retirement System and Employee Retirement System. So some of the different variables that we keep in mind as we start to develop the budget are on page 4. After those first 4 pages, the rest of this document is a selection of appendices. So this is where I mentioned before, it really is kind of like budgeting 101. This is a good reference for all these different topics. So the first one, New York State Uniform System of Accounts, talks about how we function in the business office every day. When we talk about a budget code, what is that code made up of? And what's the process for tracking where we're spending and where we're receiving revenue? Appendix B is the legal requirements for the budget development process. So what are the timelines and timeframes, deadlines, dates that we have to meet? C is a glossary of terms. There will be a quiz. No, not really, but it is a long list of terms. There's a lot of jargon that goes along with budgeting. I do my best to try to break it down in a way that hopefully it makes sense. But Appendix C is a great place to go, like, oh my gosh, Todd mentioned that term again. I don't remember what it means. Well, there's a definition for you. It can be found in that glossary. You can also always ask me, of course. Appendix D is state aid information, a little bit of history on state aid, some current information about state aid. State aid is in D. E is more information about fund balance. And then F, G, and H are some charts and data looking at the current year and going back several years to look at what has our expenditures been and what have our revenues been in the different areas. So again, just a really good reference and starting place as we start talking about the budget and the development process for 26, 27. Oh, sorry, I didn't have the slide up there. There's the list of appendices. And then just two last things. One, I always give a shout out to Sierra Pizzol, our communications specialist, because she does a great job of taking the information that we work on and making it accessible. So all the documents that we use for budget development are put on board docs when they're part of a budget meeting, but we also put them on our budget development specific site, and it all gets tracked there. So by the time we're in May, the left-hand side of this page is just a running list of all the meetings that we have had and the documents from each one of those meetings. So again, this is a great place to go if people have questions. The handbook from tonight will be posted there in the near future, so great place to go to find information. And I will finish with the timeline overall, just as a reminder that we will be back in January and we'll be talking about the rollover budget. Any other questions?
I have some questions. Our opinions or maybe advice on the contracts. I think that we're going to have a very busy end of the school year, and I think we should work on I know why they all do at the same time. Former Superintendent Sutherland was trying to clean the deck for our new superintendent to come in. But to have them all stacked and now due at the same year creates budgetary possibilities and then also problems. But that'll be a challenge for this year. Not only negotiating those, but also developing a budget around them. My suggestion is we stay away from any instructional staff cuts this budget year. I understand it's going to be a tough budget year, but we are a school. I don't think I need to define what an instructional staff is, but I will. If anybody's got a roster, answer the bell, and is commonly called a teacher. And if there are going to be any personnel cuts, I would like to be notified by the March meeting, not when we're presented with a tentative budget. And if it can't be done during the March meeting, I suggest we create another board meeting so we have that notification before we're looking at a tentative budget and then ask to vote on that. I do believe it will be a tough year, but I said that consecutively, and we've been able to come through with a decent budget. In reference to James's question about using fund balances, and then you gave the example of the TRS. If we pull from that to fund the TRS contribution for 26-27, we have to refill that that fund. If you keep pulling from, that's how some schools get in trouble. They pull from their fund balance, they pull from their fund balance, and then a rainy day happens, and then they're in real trouble. This school is very fortunate. We have a decent amount of fund balance to cushion these situations. I would also, see, and I know Todd will do this, and I don't want it to be a throttle neck or a restrictor, but if we believe that it's gonna be a tough year budget-wise, and we get that feeling early on, or actually notification that we start to control spending as the year moves forward, at all possible, without diminishing our education.
Thank you, Dave.
Dave, I'm going to ask for clarification. So when you were talking about changes to personnel by March, can you talk to us a little bit more? Because I just want to make sure to understand what exactly you're looking for.
Well, in previous budgets, maybe I don't want to see any cuts in personnel. But again, I don't want to see any instructional cuts. And that's not based on my background. It's based on the fact that I think that we've done enough in that arena. But previously, we've had notifications almost at the very end of the process that we're going to have to cut particular positions. And it gives us very little time to discuss those, maybe even argue for them. And it's not just us that has to justify or defend or cajole us to put those back into a possible budget. Other members of the community may want to have earlier notification in order to provide some evidence that positions don't need to be cut, they need to be funded. That's my, and the earlier that we get that information, the better. I think that, I personally think, to be quite honest, and I hate that term because that means all the other things that I said were a lie, but I think that a lot of these decisions have already been, contemplated as not at this point, but as the budget is developed, we know where things are going to lie down. So the sooner we know, the sooner folks know, it makes it a lot easier. Does that help? That's my thoughts.
I think so. Did that clarify it?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. All right. Any other questions as we start the development process? All right, then I'm going to move us on to discussion. So first up, we have the capital project update as we wind down, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, so as we are cranking up the budget process, we are winding down, as Tracy said, the capital project. We are at the final point of getting our final pay apps for four major contractors together, working with the schoolhouse, which continues to be an amazing resource for us in helping us get to where we need to get to close this out. Working on just they call the pencil copies of those payouts, and hopefully we'll have them in this week. Our goal in working with our bond council is to have all our paperwork submitted to the state by Friday, December 19th. As you recall, it needs to be in by the end of the school year. So Todd has been working with, what's that? End of calendar year, yes. Yeah.
She gave you 10 more days.
Yeah, right. So, working to make sure we can get all that information together and submitted so that everything is paid for and we're in good standing.
Does anyone have any questions related to the capital project or any last end details?
Not any questions, but I think I just heard everything's going to be done in December and we're going to have a good holiday.
Ho, ho, ho.
Mike, one question, are all the facilities and rooms, are they open to students now?
Yes, yep.
question. Can we, at some point, I think I mentioned it to you,
Yep.
see some sort of comparison, where we were, like what went out to bid, what was projected, what the potentials were, if we had enough money, where we landed?
Yep.
Check the list against each
The
other.
alternatives.
Yes.
Alternate jobs, yep.
I think as part of that, we always allocate money for contingency, whether we hold it back because with construction, you just never know. How did we do compared to that? How much of that did we require, and so forth? So I'm curious about that. When you're doing Kelly's analysis, if you could include that.
Yes.
I'm not asking for it right now.
The contingency that we had was used, we didn't spend it, so we used that to do some of the alternates that we didn't
Right.
originally accept in the bid. So yes, those two pieces go together.
Right, what I was thinking of specifically is like the asbestos component of it, right? And then just when we're looking at projects in general, then of course we always do have to hold it back, but I'm curious about how we kind of netted out, if that makes sense. Yes, okay. Any other questions related to that? If anyone has any questions, then just please email Todd, just copy Mike on it. Mike, I'm going to let you continue with the building usage update.
Yes, this has been a popular discussion point for the last couple of months. I am happy to say that we were able to work with buildings and grounds and athletics and work through some of the open gym space to provide some additional times for our basketball group. So we're excited about that. Wednesday of this week, Todd and I will be meeting with buildings and grounds to kind of review the process, go over some of the things that we've talked about, or that some ideas that we've kind of floated out there in regards to process. So we'll have that meeting, I believe it's Wednesday, the 10th. Yep. So, but yes, we have thankfully been able to satisfy some of those requests for gym space and times and things like that.
Mike, can you go through and talk just a little bit about one of the ideas of prioritizing Greenville students?
Yes, yep. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we take into consideration as we start to look at these applications for the use, we know that this is primarily an issue during the winter time when people are looking to come inside for our sports. We want to make sure that we are prioritizing our students who are Greenville students first. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing students who are in season. So in the winter time, obviously that'd be a basketball or wrestling or perhaps volleyball teams, youth teams that come in and really affiliated with Greenville. And then removal from that is some of those programs that are not necessarily Greenville youth-centered programs, but want to be able to get in to use some of our AAU, whether it's basketball or whether it's softball, volleyball, some of those things that may only have a couple of Greenville students on those teams. They kind of bump down in regards to priorities. So we're really taking a look at an opportunity to make sure that the families and the students who are at the younger levels and are participating in sports that will eventually grow our programs, we make sure that they have priority.
As far as some of the long-term programs, guys that have been, say like some of the pickup basketball that goes on with some of the seniors and such, they've been at it for a long time, where would they fall into the mix with that? It makes sense when you said everything sounds great, I just wondered where that would.
Yeah, the idea is not to eliminate any current groups that are using the spaces, but being more, I think our older folks who come in, I should say older, to play pickup basketball, they need to be a little bit more flexible in the times that they're coming in, a little later. I don't want to have our youth programs in the gyms at 9 o'clock if necessary. I think our older community members who are using the gyms can certainly start a little later and just open up spots that way.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, and let's see, third for discussion, we have the Latin trip update.
Okay.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, it was requested last time to get a Latin update. Kelsey Mayo happened to give us an update almost, may have been the night of our last board meeting. So ideally enough, we can kind of report out. She has let me know that they have had a smaller group of, if you remember correctly, they had to have a certain amount of students go to be by themselves on this trip. And they didn't quite make that threshold with students who were wanting to go. So they are ending up with another school trip and combining. And what this has done actually has lessened the amount of money per student to go by about $230 than the previous itinerary. And they've also had to amend their itinerary to add Athens because that was an area that the other school wanted to hit. Again, this is one of the things that Kelsey knew from the beginning, and we kind of knew from the beginning we had to have a little flexibility. This is an educational opportunity, really an educational trip for these kids. And if we're going to have to combine, the other school had Athens as part of their itinerary. So we are able to get our kids going, and it looks like it's cheaper than what had been originally thought out, and we're in a good space right now to make sure that these kids are, everybody who wanted to go is going to be able to go. So.
I just have a question on how that's going to work. I would assume when our kids go, they're under our code of conduct, our behavioral policies and so on. Does it change at all? Like, they won't be rooming with the kids from the other group
No.
or anything like that? They're
No,
still
we'll
under our
continue,
code.
they're still our students, and we'll have to abide by our code. Yep.
Mike, one question, is there, are we a go on this, or is there a go, no-go date?
We're moving along as a go. Yep.
Everything was fully paid for as a parent last week.
Yeah.
No, 100% it was paid for. The deposit was last year.
We have insurance on that, I hope?
I hope so. Yes, yeah, there was. We had the option. I think they came with a basic, but there was an option to buy more. But no, barring catastrophic events.
Wait, an option to buy versus a requirement?
I think
for
that there
insurance?
was a built-in small policy, but if you want to be upgraded.
Okay, if you want to upgrade it, fine, all right.
So
So that was an individual or a group decision?
that was an individual. The tour company allowed for so much, and I forget exactly what it was. And then there were other tiers you could buy, which would continue also on the trip for like medical emergency that has to be, taken care of.
Well, it sounds like a very exciting trip, and if you're short a chaperone, let me know.
I don't think there are any,
Yeah, I'm sure they're not.
not being short of chaperones, that's for sure.
Exactly, but I actually think adding Athens in is fabulous, given the influence that the Greek civilization had on the Roman civilization. It will be very interesting to kind of see that segue. Do they have to write a report when they come back? Sorry. No, I think they should.
Okay,
They'd
can we
be
move on
willing
now,
to it. Please add that, Mike. All right, the next topic for discussion is the board appointment terms. So I'm going to take this because we talked about it a little bit last month and it is quite confusing. So what I wanted to do was to, again, just go over all of the moving pieces. So the one thing I will say is the board did go through and we read all of the letters, and we received quite a few letters. There was Greenville has a very wide range of opinions, and I will state it that way. What came down to one of the things is that we could have an election or appoint, and 99, if not, I'm gonna say 100% of all the letters did not want an election. So now, the way that it works for the 2 seats, because that's what I want to clarify a little bit. In May, or prior to May, there will be 2 seats that come up for 3-year terms. Then we still have 2 seats that are currently filled that are through May, through the election day. So what will happen is on election day, then, depending upon how many people are running and so forth, we will go through and we will remove the incumbents from the tally in May. And you take the next 2 individuals that you rank order them. All the individuals. So if we have 5 people running, you pull up the 2 incumbents, the 3 people that are remaining, you rank order based on the number of votes. The top 2, minus the incumbents, right, will then serve from election day in May through July 1st. That is the first piece. The second piece is then in July, all of the votes are tallied, and the 2 individuals who have the highest number of votes will win a 3-year term. And then the next 2 individuals will then sit for a 1-year term, which are the 2 seats that were filled and are up for another term in 2027. So hopefully that clarifies kind of what will happen as we go through. It was explained to me multiple times and I didn't quite understand about the incumbents and everything, but the reason for removing the incumbents from the May decision is because they're currently seated on the board. And so then it just creates more of a mess. So that's why they're removed and so forth. And when it was explained that way, I'm like, oh, that's perfectly logical. So hopefully by sharing that information with the public and everything else, that makes it at least more understandable. So that is the process and so forth. So I wanted to share that. Any questions related to that? If not, then I'm going to move us on to the policy. We've got a first reading. Updated policies for 6140, 5140, 4180, 6145, and 6430.
Tracy, can you just explain the reason for the 2 new policies?
Be more specific which ones. All of these are...
Okay, 6145 says new policy.
Okay.
And 6430 says new policy. So those are things we haven't currently had. We didn't update that. It's newly.
6340?
6430.
6430, okay. So the interpreters for hearing impaired parents. So this is required by New York State. And what it is that we need to provide parents interpreters for hearing impairment. So if that is a situation that occurs, then the school needs to find someone that could provide it. So that is a required policy for that. So that is the reason for that one. And the next one was the 6430, the graduation ceremony policy. And again, New York State requires that the school have a graduation policy of what is permitted and so forth. So in going through, the policy committee identified that those were 2 areas that we currently did not have anything. We needed to add it in as we go through and review the different policies. So that was the reason for those 2. The other ones, let me see, the reimbursement for expenses, there basically what we did was we added in the ability for people to be reimbursed for tipping. up to 25%. So, and then let's see, we have the special ed and the 504, and so those were just a review of the current policies and going through legal counsel and making sure that they are still in keeping with the requirements by law. And just to kind of refresh everyone's memory, the policy committee is going through and reviewing all of the policies. So it's an ongoing 3-year effort. All right, any other questions? And then we have a couple of second readings on different policies, the dissection of animals, then which provides an opt-out option for a student, then drugs in the workplace, the maximum temperature, which is also a requirement that came through last year by New York State, and then bylaws pertaining to student records. If anyone has any questions related to those, they are already on the second reading.
I had a question about the timeline that the school has to respond to a request for records in that. I think 45 days is what was in there. And I was wondering if, on one hand, I said, you know, with all the things that are going on at the school, I wouldn't want them to be pressured to have to provide documents too quick. Right? They have to have enough time to get those. At the same time, if there was something that was maybe super important or mental health issue or something like that parents or someone needed to get info on, I was hoping that there would be something in place that would that the timeline would be shortened. Obviously, the school could work faster if they wanted to, if they chose. But I was wondering if that date, is that something that was chosen by us, or is that something that was handed down? Or that timeline of 45 days, is that handed down by the state? Or is that something that we just chose?
Right, well, I think it's a combination. So basically all of the policies get reviewed by our council, right, prior to or at the time that the policy committee is reviewing it. And then it becomes a balancing act because let's just say it needs to be, in that particular case, I would have to go back and ask council if it is a requirement by New York State. Many instances it is, or if not, it's a federal requirement on timing. And then the other thing is just the balancing act of being responsive, but not having too short a time that then we are in violation of a policy or violation of a date. So it is a balancing act.
And the council that's going through, is that, who would that be? Who falls under council?
The policy council, so it's a separate firm. I'll send you.
That's what I was wondering, it was a private firm.
It's a private firm that we, at every reorganization, we take and we appoint them, and they specifically review policy. That's what they specialize in.
Understood. And is there, and I don't want to keep you guys too long, but is there an approach as to how many policies are being reviewed per certain timeline or year? Was there a way that we were trying to approach that? Trying to get through, say, the whole entire book, the whole entire policy?
Right. What we did is we took and grouped them into, we divided them into 2 groups: required by law or New York State, and those that are not required. And what we've been doing is focusing first on those that are required, saying they have a higher priority. So what we did was we created a spreadsheet, added all of them in, divided the line, and we are just going through them. In some instances, like at last policy meeting or the previous one, we were able to get through 4 or 5. So it depends, you know, when it's a short policy, the committee can get through usually much faster. But this past meeting that we had several policies that were 4 pages each.
Right, I saw it, yeah, that's great. All right, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions related to policy? All right, then I'm going to move us on to action items. I need a motion to approve the minutes for the board meeting of November 17th, 2025.
Mayor from Kelly?
Any discussion? All in favor? I need a motion to approve the finance reports for the month ending November 30th, 2025. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to accept the Committee on Special Education recommendations. Mariah said second. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the Greenville Central School District Health and Welfare Service. No. Oh, personnel, sorry. I need a motion to approve the personnel agenda.
Eric, need a second? Mariah?
Any discussion?
I have a question. Mike, can you explain the abolishing of the custodial position?
Yes, last spring, we created a position to be able to offset, I don't want to say a loss, but we needed to fill a position while we had someone out. So during the course of that time, we couldn't have two people encumber the same position. So last spring, we created a position to make sure that we were able to continue to be able to staff our buildings and grounds the way we needed to. And so with the recent resignation, we no longer needed that extra spot.
So it's not shorting the staff, we're not cutting the
No,
position that's
no,
current?
it's not cutting a position. No.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Now, if I could have a motion to approve the Health and Welfare Services contract for Grateful Christian School for the 2020.
And Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve Kelly Kubicki as our NISBA advocacy liaison.
She doesn't get to vote no.
Oh, no, she gets to vote. Any
Eric and
discussion?
Karen?
Any discussion?
Thank you, thank
Does
you,
anyone
thank you.
else want
Thank
it?
you.
We thank you for your service. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Kelly. A motion to approve the updated policies 5210 and 6372.
Dave? Kelly?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
If I could have a motion to appoint the membership of the committees.
Kelly? Karen?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the tentative DECA overnight field trip. Did I say it correctly? Okay, thank you.
Kelly? Mariah?
And this is almost a placeholder is the way I read it. If they win, then, but because of the dates of the requirement, then in theory, so yes, we want them to win. Exactly. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. If I could have a motion to approve the overnight FFA field trips.
Eric? Karen?
Any discussion?
Where are they going?
One is Oswegatchie, I believe, yes, and the other one is Albany Capital Center for the FFA State Leadership.
It's on the next page.
The winter weekend.
Top.
Are they staying in Albany for an overnight?
If it's an overnight.
It looks like it. Huh.
They might have to get up early and eat breakfast.
All right, let's see, any other discussion? Well, we need to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I need a motion to approve the purchase of a replacement school van in the amount of $109,000.
Eric and Kelly?
And I know we have discussion on this. Why don't you start it up?
I am very grateful, Todd. Thank you for putting the information that's in there because that answered all my questions as to the costs and where it's coming from.
Just because it's a big one and transportation items are kind of big on the agenda, maybe we want to review what what that was right there and how you justified it?
Yeah, so I can go over it. So this is actually to replace a van. We say van, it's our small bus. We don't have any true vans, but when we refer to the van, it's actually our small buses. There was unfortunately a bus accident in July that bus was then totaled. July 14th was the day of the accident. This finally all got sorted out last week. So it's been a long process of working with our insurance to sort it all out. So the bus that was totaled, was a 2017 bus. Our insurance right away will give us what the current market value of that bus is. So the current market value of that bus was on here, it's all listed, $41,996 minus we have a $2,000 deductible. So in August, we received a check for $39,996 as a full market value. However, in our policy as a district, we have full replacement cost coverage, meaning we don't just want the market value of what was totaled, we actually have to replace it with a brand new one. We want to make sure that that is covered. That's what took so long. So it was multiple months of our insurance, working with bus vendors, working with Mary as our transportation supervisor, going back and forth to try to determine if truly the bus, that was a 2017 bus, existed as a new 2026 bus, what would that bus be? Long story short, they came back and said that it would be a $90,000 bus. However, the comparables that they used was for a bus company that doesn't actually have a bus that they can sell us at that rate. So we had to work with other vendors, and Mary, kudos to Mary as our transportation supervisor, she's amazing at her job. She worked with vendors and found a bus that we could actually get delivered, meaning we could take ownership of in the near future, and had all the features that she wanted and needed as a transportation supervisor. That bus was not $90,000, that bus cost $109,000. The insurance then did give us the additional check, so in total we got $90,000 from insurance for the purpose of purchasing a new bus. In addition, we were fortunate enough this year, we had several buses that were scheduled to be replaced, separate from this, that we sold outright. So we actually had some revenue from the sale of those buses that was enough to cover the $19,000 difference. So that kind of made us whole. So this was not an additional, we didn't have to pull from somewhere else in the budget. We didn't have to worry about creating a deficit anywhere. It worked out between what the insurance covered and what we sold the old buses for covered the cost of this new bus.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now this is us saying we're going to go ahead and spend the money that we have for a replacement bus.
Because this was an unplanned purchase at this rate for transportation, right? Every other bus, when we do bus bonds, the board approves it, it's approved by voters, totally different process. This is considered an emergency bus purchase, has to be approved by the board, so that's why it's on for board approval.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Tracy, I don't want to cut off. You mentioned we were gaining some income from the sale of previous buses. So in our bus replacement program, we don't assume that there's going to be some value to the bus that we're replacing. We assume that it's a zero value.
We assume some. Mary was actually able to find a buyer that bought some of our buses for significantly more than what we thought we would sell them for.
No, that's all right. You can provide that if you want to.
Yeah, so like 2 of them we sold for $19,000 each, which may not sound like a lot, but in the past, if we got $5,000 on a trade-in, we were feeling good.
So out of the insurance payment and then the value of the bus we had to buy, are we approving the 109 or are we actually approving the 19,000?
No, you're approving the 109. Because we're still expending that out as a district, regardless of where those funds came from. We are still expensing them as a district.
And then, so there will be some excess funds, right, out of this whole deal?
There is some, so we balance this all with the purchase, separate from this bus, the purchase of the new buses that were in the replacement cycle for this year. The amount that we would have borrowed in bonds to pay for all that, we actually decreased that amount by the other amount that we got from selling the buses. So timing-wise, it worked out that we were able to kind of set aside what we needed to for this purpose, but also decreased what we would have borrowed in bonds to pay for the new buses. We do, Dave, have some excess because I didn't know this amount that was going to come from insurance until maybe 2 weeks ago now. So yes, we will have some funds that will go into a transportation code that if there's some other need, we can use it for that.
That's fine, I like extra money. But this bus, if my memory is correct, don't we try to replace on the 8-year cycle? This bus was at the end of its lifespan anyway, right? So it really lucked out. Not that I'm encouraging you
I am sure the insurance company looked over it very carefully.
First 6 months.
As you were talking, Todd, one of the things that kind of went through my mind is the EV buses, because after 2027, we are not allowed to purchase regular buses.
Correct.
So then, if there is an accident, we'll be required to purchase an EV bus?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. All right. Well, I'm very happy we had the insurance policy, the additional one, because that would have been very painful otherwise. So, thank you for being conservative. We still have to vote. Thank you for keeping me on track. Any other questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, I need a motion to approve a change order for the 25 split units for the elementary school project 2022 CIP in the amount of $10,445.
Kelly?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, moving us on to board topics for discussion at a future meeting. Does anyone have anything that they would like to? Oh, Kelly, go for it.
I mentioned this last month. For those of us that are sitting on committees, I'd like to see us start doing a quick share out on a rotating basis, just so everybody on the board is up to date on what different committees in the district are doing. I won't be here in January, so I'm going to leave it to Dave to update us on the safety committee. And Eric, if you could give us a quick update on the facilities committee.
Can I ask, are we meeting before then? Because I missed the last one.
Sort of business meeting, so.
I missed the last one.
If not, I'll take the policy committee and do it in January. I'm fine, then you can do the next one.
That's fine, and then in February, Eric will prepare for facilities and I'll hit DLC because that doesn't meet till January.
All right, so I'll do policy. Dave will do safety.
Thank you.
January.
January.
It doesn't.
Right, you got plenty of time
That's
to
what you're
prepare.
working on, so we all know what's going on.
I'm so good at taking orders from women, that's no problem.
Ooh. Yes, dear. Anyways, moving right along. One of the things I just wanted to have, since this is a discussion, how does everyone feel? Is everyone comfortable? Years ago, we did have then having the committees and do the share out and so forth. And so I think that it's a great idea to bring it back, and just to kind of, the idea being just to keep everyone in the loop, since not all of us sit on all of the committees. Then really what we're looking for is the high level, here are the key points that the committee is addressing, or some of the issues that are being discussed. That's really kind of what we're looking for. And then if we take and rotate it over the entire year, so that it's, and I think that this is the difference from the way we did it previously, where everyone reported out every single time. It became a little redundant, especially when some of the committees weren't meeting. So we'll put together a full-on annual schedule. Daphne, we can work on that. And then that way, the goal being to inform each other, but without wasting time, shall we say.
I have an additional item I'd like to discuss. If the board will remember that when we developed and then approved the cell phone policy or internet connected device policy, we asked for periodic updates. So if we could get one of those, maybe in the January meeting, real quick, maybe Mike could garner information from the different buildings, and just provide us with how it's going. I hear it's going great. As a board member, I'd like to ask the policy committee to review policy number 6240, our drug and tobacco and alcohol abuse policy in regards to vaping, and whether or not we're actually following policy. And then I would also request that it's added to the agenda that we get a vaping and bathroom use update, not periodically, almost every month.
Okay, and just to clarify for the, when you're saying to review the policy, what are you looking at there?
I was thinking about that, I knew you were gonna ask me.
Well, you're on the
So I don't know if it's the right spot, policy, to have a discussion there, or if we wanna have a broad discussion right here, but I don't think our colleagues have reviewed 6240
Okay.
and know it verbatim. So we could discuss that at policy and then decide how we're gonna bring it to the board.
Okay, and I'm just looking at something, give me a second. Okay, all right, I have a better sense of it.
You have gist of it?
Yeah, and we can meet offline and then just kind of make sure that we're in sync for what exactly we're looking
Okay.
for. Okay.
And can I just get clarification in regards to bathroom use update?
Well,
What type of information?
what Nicole brought to us last meeting, I don't know if it had an impact on, but it had an impact on me. I really wish she was here today because I would like to congratulate her on that presentation and quite frankly, the bravery that it took to develop that kind of report in public to a board. But I would like to know if the conditions that she reported are getting better. And what is being done to address the remediation of those situations.
How would we, do you have any thoughts on how we would measure that? Like what kind of things we could give to the administration to help us? Like what kind of data would we be looking for? How would we request that information come back to us? Like Nicole had done a survey.
Oh, the survey,
She had done a survey and gave some.
I never do a follow-up survey or something
Yeah,
like
the
that.
administration wouldn't be able to.
I trust my administrators. I think that, that they're going to provide information that's accurate and useful. I don't, something nebulous like that, I don't really see how it's going to be written down, but certainly a list of items that they've put in place or attempted to put in place that could address that issue could be provided. But as far as that goes, James,
That's
the board,
not
I
to
think-
argue, it's just to.
No, I
I think it's a
appreciate
good
it,
way
but
that we could get some good info.
As far as I go as a board member, I bring issues to the administration, and I know that they'll work on them, and I appreciate their diligence on that, but I'm not gonna dig in the weeds and say, you need to do this and do that.
All right, I think we have a general understanding, and so I'm sure if Michael or anyone has questions, he'll reach out to you, Dave, just without any other things that we want to add for future topics. All right, then just a couple of reminders. January 12th, we have a budget meeting. Number one, I thought today was number one.
True.
Number two,
Yeah.
1A, we'll call it 1A, or 1B. Then we have January 21st, we have the board retreat that is from 4 to 8. So please RSVP to Daphne if you have not already. And then February 9th is a business meeting. All right, I'm going to move us on to the closing open forum. And please note the same guidelines apply as stated during the first open forum. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Do we have any emails? No. Okay. Then if I could have a motion to adjourn the meeting, everyone. Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.